Check my clock, I can't stop. Fuck around, make my 40 pop.
Alright, there's been like a huge Boruto theory that's been floating around, of course, the Boruto community over the past week. And of course, I do want to talk about it. And I do have to point out, this theory right here actually has a lot of legs. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that's going to be completely true, but I haven't necessarily heard about a theory as good as this since people thought that Jiraiya was actually going to be Kashin Koji. But people think that Code could potentially be a vessel for Isshiki Otsutsuki. Now, I do want to point out for the anime owners, this is going to be a lot of manga spoils in this video. So of course, if you guys don't necessarily want to be spoiled, I'd recommend clicking off of this video. And I want to give a quick shout out to T. Brian. I'm pretty sure this theory didn't necessarily originate with him, but he was the first YouTuber that I've seen bring this up, and of course it got me super interested. I'm not necessarily going to talk about every single point that he talked about in that video, but if you guys want to watch that, of course it's going to be linked in the description below. But regardless, this theory right here really starts from the 15th experiment. If you guys don't necessarily remember, there was a chapter when Kawaki basically got the karma seal, and to be honest, that chapter might actually be adapted into the Boruto anime very quickly. So in fact, this theory right here can possibly be proven correct or proven incorrect extremely quickly, like super quickly. All right, so in that scene right then and there, Kawaki got his karma seal through a test tube in an experiment. Now, Kawaki wasn't necessarily the only kid in this experiment. Reportedly, there were 13 other kids that went through this experiment and they also died. Kawaki himself was the 14th experiment. Now, in that specific scene right then and there, they talked about there being a 15th experiment. Because Kawaki got the karma seal, no one really talked about that 15th experiment. Now, I do believe even if Code is not the actual vessel, this theory is going to continue on and people are going to continually try to find another vessel in the anime of Boruto. Not even just specifically about Isshiki Otsutsukis. The way Isshiki Otsutsukis and Momoshiki were also talking about finding adequate vessels, they basically made it seem like it was a rare type of thing. So of course, if this 15th experiment is an actual adequate vessel, other Otsutsuki members out there might try to come to Earth to actually seek out this 15th experiment to make that person their vessel as well, to be an adequate person to actually reborn into. So of course, this right here is going to be a very big topic for the rest of the Boruto series, in my opinion, even if nothing really comes to bear to fruit. But of course, this right here, in my opinion, is where the Code theory actually spurred from, and of course it has a lot of validity behind it. Now, another thing is the fact that Code seems to be jealous of Kawaki. It basically started a couple episodes ago when the Kata organization found out that Kawaki went missing, and Code kind of made a joke about it. He kind of whistled in like a joking manner. Now, of course, a lot of people would just brush that off as Code being a playful type of guy, and of course, in my opinion, I think Code is that way as well. But of course, that doesn't really mean that there isn't any meaning behind it. And of course, not only that, Delta also said that Code would benefit from Kawaki going missing. Now, of course, this right here is super interesting because of course, if we do agree that Code is actually the vessel, or Code actually does want to become the vessel, then of course he would then benefit from Kawaki going missing, because if Kawaki is truly missing, then Jigen, or excuse me, Isshiki Otsutsukis would then have no choice but to then utilize the vessel of Code. So of course, that right there would make a lot of sense. Now, not only that, when Delta and Code were also talking again in one of the previous episodes, Delta also said that it was a shame that he was his favorite. Now, of course, the his that he's talking about is of course going to be Isshiki Otsutsukis. Now, the he that they were talking about, no one really knew who Isshiki Otsutsuki's favorite actually was. A lot of fans out there thought that they were talking about Amada being Isshiki Otsutsukis' favorite, and of course that right there would definitely be a very realistic situation, man, because as we know right now, Amada has the most access to Isshiki Otsutsukis. A lot of people also thought that they were talking about Kashin Koji, because in the Boruto manga, Isshiki Otsutsuki said that he trusted Kashin Koji the most out of the insiders of the Kata organization, which of course fell apart very quickly in the manga. But regardless, a lot of people now are also thinking that Delta and Code were actually talking about Kawaki, and of course the reason why it is a shame is because Code himself is not the favorite of Isshiki Otsutsukis. Thus, Isshiki Otsutsukis would not necessarily want to be reborn into Code's body. Now, as I said, this theory right here is super strong. It has a lot of legs, and I would not be surprised at all if in the upcoming episodes we get or acquire even more evidence that Code could potentially be a willing vessel for Isshiki Otsutsuki. But as I said earlier in this video, this theory could potentially be proven correct or incorrect very quickly. Another thing that I found really interesting in regards to other people possibly having the karma seal, this scene right here when the chapter did actually come out flew way under the radar because of the mystique of Kawaki finally appearing into the Boruto manga. But when Boruto showed Kawaki the karma seal, and he basically said like, hey, I have the same thing that you have, Kawaki was surprised, but he wasn't surprised in the fact that there was other people out there with the karma seal. Kawaki basically said, so you are trackers from the Kata organization. This right here makes it seem to me that once Kawaki seen that someone else had the karma seal, then he was absolutely sure that they were actually from the Kata organization. That tells me that other people in the Kata organization also have the karma seal, because of course if he himself thought that only him and Jigen were the only people with the karma seal, then of course that would have been a much different reaction from Kawaki. So of course this right here leads me to believe that it's definitely possible for Code to also have a karma seal as well. Now I've seen a lot of videos about this theory. I didn't necessarily see a lot of YouTubers talking about the downside to this theory and why this theory could potentially be a wrong theory. Now the first one is going to be, why in the world would Code want to actually become a vessel for Isshiki Otsutsukis? The fate of a vessel is not a very good fate. Of course, they're going to be essentially sacrificing their body for an Otsuki member to, of course, reborn themselves into that body. Like, hypothetically, what is the upside for Code actually becoming a vessel of Isshiki Otsutsuki? Code, in theory, already has a lot of the upsides as it is. Of course, Code is in the insiders of the Kata organization. Code is pretty much frequently in contact with Isshiki Otsutsukis, pretty much being one of his right-hand mans. Here's the thing, this right here would not be the first situation where a person in the series of Naruto would willingly give up their body for someone else to pretty much become their vessel. We've seen this with Sasuke, of course, quote unquote, he didn't necessarily completely expect to give up his body to Orochimaru, and of course he did not in the end. But also Gurren was a character that was super jealous of Sasuke actually being the #1 to Orochimaru, and Gurren wanted to become the vessel for Orochimaru. And it wasn't just only Gurren, a lot of people want to become the vessel for Orochimaru. So that right there could be the same thing in this particular situation. Now I, in my opinion, have a very big problem with that. Again, there is no upside to actually becoming the vessel for Isshiki Otsutsukis. Now of course, if they want to continue down this rabbit hole, I would not necessarily say it's going to be out of character for the Naruto series, but I 1000% have to point out that I would not be a fan of this move at all. Now another big reason why Cole would not actually be in this particular situation is because Isshiki Otsutsuki himself came up with a lot of possibilities to actually create a god tree that did not include Code. Now if you guys recall, the original opportunity or the original idea for Isshiki Otsutsukis was that he himself in the body of Jigen was going to allow himself to be eaten by the Ten Tails, and then he would actually reborn into the body of Kawaki. Now as I said, if Code was an actual vessel, it would be extremely easy to just throw Code to the Ten Tails and then reborn into whichever vessel he wanted, and of course keep Jigen around. And of course that right there would definitely be a very quick situation. But of course, no, he opted to have himself be eaten by the Ten Tails, which makes no sense, of course, if he had the option of Code actually being there. Now not only that, once the Kata organization found out that Boruto had the karma seal of Momoshiki, everything changed. Everything changed. And of course Isshiki Otsutsukis then thought to himself that he would then feed Boruto to the Ten Tails and then reborn himself into the body of Kawaki. Now of course, as I said, if Code was also part Otsutsuki, if Code also had the karma seal, why did Isshiki Otsutsukis potentially go through all of that trouble just to secure the body of Boruto to actually throw him to the Ten Tails? Remind you guys, acquiring Boruto was not an easy feat, or would not have been an easy feat for Isshiki Otsutsuki, because of course he has a lot of connections to not only the Hidden Leaf Village but also two of the strongest characters in the ninja world. Now of course I do have to point out, just getting Kawaki means you would also have to go through them as well, but of course Boruto in itself would be a completely different feat, because not only that, not only would you have to defeat Naruto, Sasuke, Kawaki, and Boruto, but now you also have to worry about Momoshiki potentially taking over Boruto and becoming Borushiki, and then potentially also defeating him, all while you only have 3 days to live. In theory, all Isshiki Otsutsuki had to do was just throw Code to the Ten Tails and just reborn into the body of Kawaki after he gave Kawaki the karma seal. And one of the more interesting reasons upon why this theory could possibly not be true is, of course, when Amato and Kashin Koji actually decided that they were going to actually break off from the Kata organization and disobey Isshiki Otsutsukis and start their own plan, their #1 goal was the security of Kawaki. They could literally care less about Code. Now of course this right here might just be because of the fact that the Boruto manga didn't necessarily want to spoil a lot of the things surrounding Code, because of course we did not get to see a lot of things around Code. But regardless, I think it is a little bit damning that in that exchange right there, they mentioned absolutely nothing about Code. Now, as I've said throughout this video, this theory right here is one of the strongest theories that I've seen in the past couple of months or even the past couple of years. Because of that, I have to give this theory a lot of validity, but of course I did want to bring up a couple of downsides to this theory and why this theory isn't necessarily 100% foolproof. Now of course I didn't necessarily bring up all the reasons why Code would actually be the vessel for Isshiki Otsutsukis, and I didn't necessarily bring up all the counter arguments to the reasons why Code can't necessarily be the vessel. I just really brought up the strongest reasons. But let me know what you guys think about this in the comment section below and give me your opinion. Do you guys think that Code is actually another vessel for Isshiki Otsutsuki? And if he is, why do you guys think that Code would want to be a vessel for Isshiki Otsutsukis? But it's been your boy Baara, and we out.
This a knife.